Hello, everybody. Welcome to The Passion Project, a weekly podcast brought to you by the WHS Tech Group. I'm one of your hosts, Derek, and I'm joined by Guru.
Hello.
This is a weekly podcast where we bring in a guest so they can talk about a particular topic that they're very passionate about. It can be anything: animals, collecting oil paintings of Nicolas Cage, a sport, stamp collecting. This week, our guest is Charlotte.
Hey.
How are you doing, Charlotte?
I'm doing pretty good.
Nice. Okay, Charlotte. So, what are you passionate about?
I am passionate about, in a broad sense, politics and debate, but specifically a organization called JSA, which stands for the Junior State of America. JSA is the largest student-run organization in the entire United States. There's over 10,000 members, and there's chapters all over the country that are divided into like states and regions, and at a local level, at the high school level, we have our own chapters where we have weekly meetings where we, come and debate stuff.
When did you first start to get into like debating or like having an interest in politics?
I have always been a hugely political person. However, my family and I do not exactly share similar views. And when I began to enter the bleeding heart liberal phase of my life, I kind of needed an outlet for that. So when I was a sophomore, I joined JSA to debate stuff. And not only was it an opportunity for me to actually share my views with people that agreed with me and also disagreed with me, but it was also an opportunity to, what I think is the best aspect of JSA, work on my speaking skills. The first probably 6 months of weekly meetings and day conventions and overnight conventions, was absolutely terrified of getting up and speaking in front of people. But then at a certain point, my need to share my opinion overrode my fear of speaking in front of my peers. So I think 2 years ago, I spoke at my first convention, and haven't shut up since.
Okay, yeah. And also maybe just for people listening who may not know a lot about JSA, can you tell them when and when they meet and stuff? And also
at high school or just
at the high schools, and also some of the conventions you guys do.
Yeah. So our weekly meetings happen on Wednesdays after school. We come and we debate. We have weekly debate topics that we talk about that we decide beforehand. And then my favorite part of JSA is the one day and the overnight conventions. Those happen every couple of months, and it's where kids from our school and kids from other schools across the state and across close by states all come together, and it's a chance for you to sort of get out of the bubble that is the opinions that your own community might have. So sometimes it is just, talking to kids that are from, also liberal Boston, Massachusetts. But for example, 2 years ago, we joint hosted a convention in DC with kids from Texas. So that was, well, they were still pretty liberal. That was a fun, change of views. The overnight conventions and all the day conventions are completely student run. We make the agendas, we decide the debates, we plan where we're going to have them and how we're going to pay for it and everything. And they're fun.
Yeah. And then is there any sort of theme to some of these conventions? Because I know I've been to one of them before, and I know for one of them it was all the debates that were sort of written were all based on science and stuff. So
yeah, we usually have pretty broad themes. We have done science and technology in modern America before. We've done ones that are based mainly off law and order, what can we do to stop crime, or what amendments should be made to stop the war on drugs, things like that. I think the next major convention, the theme is unifying the nation, which is going to be all about how policies actually translate to changes in everyday lives and things like that, and what politicians have to offer the general public.
And when is that convention?
The first, if you are a student in the greater Boston area and you're interested, the first one-day convention is October 29th at William James Hall at Harvard University. The first overnight one is December 10th at the Boston Park Plaza Hotel.
All right, Charlotte, do you hold a position or anything of the sort in the Winchester JSA?
I am the president of our chapter at WHS, and I am a director of debate statewide, which means me and another team of students create and write the little blurbs that summarize what they mean, the debates for the overnight conventions that happen 3 times a year.
And have you held officer positions in JSA in previous years?
Last year, I was the secretary, which was more or less the same responsibilities as president.
And then, so for you, Charlotte, like, why do you think it's so important to sort of have like a club, a statewide club like JSA, and like sort of getting that sort of student opinion on like these sort of heavy political topics out there?
My love for JSA comes from two main things, and one of them is that, well, I really appreciate the school system we have. I don't think it does a good job preparing kids for the real world. And the other is, I think you need to learn, like how you learn languages early on, you learn everything else about life early on. I think you need to learn to be an involved member of society early on. The first one I brought up, when you're at school or at public high school, you have certain requirements to graduate. You have to take a certain number of years of math or of a foreign language. No class of debate or public speaking or any of that sort whatsoever is ever required, and I think it's one of the things that will affect you the most in your adult life. Being able to coherently, ironically, I couldn't put together a coherent sentence right there.
Actually, though, just to say though, there is a speech and debate class offered at the high school.
Yeah, I'm taking it. But it's not a. I'll get to.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say like it is. I took it last year as a junior, and the one issue, I mean, like it being Winchester High School, there's a unfortunate perception of just like you need to take like the honors or the AP thing.
Yeah, and
so
it's
like
only offered CP.
it's
so
only
nobody
offered
takes
CP,
it.
but
Yeah.
I would definitely recommend that. That's a whole other conversation, but I would definitely recommend that people, in my opinion, they should
Please
take the
do.
class.
It's a lot of fun. Anyways, as I was saying, the ability to put your thoughts into words in a way that makes sense and that isn't just an opinion but it's backed up by fact is a really important skill to have, and it's something that I have mainly, I think, because of JSA. The exposure that I have, even if I'm debating something that I'm not interested in or it's boring or I don't agree with it, the exposure I have being on my feet and coming up with ideas as I'm saying them and answering questions that I wasn't expecting and those kinds of things are, first of all, a huge skill to have when you're talking about like job interviews and interviews for college, and are just a good thing to have for when you're, meeting people and talking to people on a daily basis, especially if the career you're going into has to do with like meeting with clients and such. The other thing I brought up was being involved politically from a young age. I think this is hugely important because, well, I know a lot of kids my age say like, oh, like I don't have time to, I'm not really well versed, I don't have time to, look into it and figure stuff out, or I don't really find it interesting. I feel like they think at a certain point that's going to change, but it doesn't. And that's what I think is a huge issue. Something that I am absolutely guilty of as well is that people, if they're involved at all, the average person will usually just have like a set of opinions and then not much else about current politics going on. I think politics in general needs to be more open to discussion than it is just my opinion is right and yours is wrong kind of thing. And if I were to compare my experience with JSA to like talking with just people regularly in like a non-debate setting, JSA is a much more productive sharing of thoughts. I have on like a daily basis, if I'm arguing with something about about a political issue, I will admit that I'm likely to be set in my ways and not want to change my opinion. However, if I'm at a JSA convention, I often enter the debates knowing that my opinion might get changed, and that's perfectly fine, and that's the way it should be. I've gone into debates and then left and had people tell me, you changed my opinion with what you said, and that not only is that like the best feeling ever, but it's a very important thing to learn that politics isn't about having your opinions and being right. It's about sharing facts and information and deciding what's right based on that.
Is there any sort of person, like whether it be an adult or a student, that sort of helped you like foster this this passion for debate or like getting involved in politics?
Well, I'd like to give a shout out to Tracy Troiano, our awesome advisor who comes with us to conventions and really saved us last year when we didn't know who our advisor is going to be and who helps us host the weekly meetings, and she's awesome. As far as mentors within JSA goes, I would definitely say it's the older kids. I remember being a sophomore, last year going to conventions and meeting these kids that were like seniors from, schools that I wasn't from, and they were so good at, and I can still like think of a couple specific in my mind, kids that like I was just amazed at how good they were at getting up and speaking in front of rooms of like anywhere from like 20 to 400 people and not messing up at all and being funny and getting their thoughts out so well. And that's something I think everyone kind of aspires to, is to be a great public speaker. So yeah.
I myself have been to, I tried doing JSA last year because a friend of mine was very strongly urging me to go to one of the conventions, and I actually did enjoy it a lot, and I tried going to more of the meetings. Just my other extracurriculars kind of became a bit too busy, but I wanted to go back to JSA often. Wait, Derek, I believe you've gone to one or two of these before,
I
too.
went to like a 1-day thing.
Yeah.
It made me want to like, and the good thing was like, I was taking speech and debate concurrently with going to that one day. I think it was in like December, and it really made me want to also like get up there, sort of share my, or at least not my particular opinion, because you could always fight for something that's you don't agree with, which I think is nice. Maybe you could also talk about in JSA. I mean, you were talking about all these different sorts of kids you're meeting, just sort of the social aspect of getting out there, getting your opinion out there, and also meeting new kids.
I think a lot of, well, JSA has allowed me to meet so many like different people, not only personality and like political view wise, but also like I know kids from all over New England now on a pretty personal level, which is cool. And at the same time, I know there's there's different kinds of people that do JSA. There are kids like me that go because they're really, really love to debate and to argue about things. And there are kids that will go to the conventions because they've heard that they're fun, or because they know that like it'll look good on a college app, which is a totally fine reason to go, and you're totally welcome to do that. But watching them come to the convention, and just at first I know they're kind of expecting to like sit there and not do anything and like listen to it and then go to the party at night, but they come and like I'll see them go into a debate and actually get like fired up and involved and start to argue about it, and then like talk about it later, like I can't believe that this kid said this. Like it's a fun thing to watch. There's another thing that popped into my head. An aspect about JSA that I really like, that I think goes hand in hand with becoming more politically involved, is that in the process of when you get assigned a debate that you sign up for when you sign up online to do a debate for a convention, you prepare research beforehand for that. So for example, one time I signed up to do a debate on why I think private prisons should be abolished. And because I signed up for that debate, I of course had to do research. So I went and I read so many different articles. I read opinion pieces, actual stories from like prisoners that were in private prisons. I watched like short documentary clips, and because of that one debate that, happened and then it was over with, I now like still know and retain all that information that is, it's important, it's a current event, and it's something that people should be kept up on. So having done something like that like 10, 15 times a year for 2 or 3 years, that's a bunch of like different little issues that I now feel more educated about than I was before.
Have you ever like hated having to research a topic just because maybe like you were assigned the opposing view of what you believed in?
Well, the way you sign up for debates for JSA is that you pick what side you want to be on and what side for the debate. So you never have to debate something you don't believe in, but I think that debating something you don't agree with is a really fun and kind of like extra thing to do. I've done some really like crazy stuff. I think I debated against gay marriage once, just for the hell of it. I mean, nobody was really going against it. I've seen kids that are like very staunch gay rights and trans rights activists get up and argue like why certain like rights aren't valid, and it's funny and it's kind of weird, but it's definitely good to be able to see the other side of things.
Yeah, in my speech and debate class, every single major debate we had, I was always put on the side I didn't want to argue for.
Exactly.
And then so like I think the first one was like gun control, and like I had to argue against that. The second one was like using animals on experiments for cosmetic stuff, and I had to argue for that. I forget what the last one was, but I actually like having to like go against my particular view. Plus, like I was always conclusion, and it's just fun to close something out.
Yeah, it's a good way of learning free thinking and critical thinking by doing, because you can't teach critical thinking in school, but doing something like debate where you have your own opinion and then you, for some reason, whatever, have to debate against it, and you're like, okay, well, I'll look it up, I won't agree with it, and then you look it up and you start thinking about it and you compare the two, and that's a way of like trying to understand, you know, things on a deeper level than your own opinions.
I would actually say school, in my opinion, I think school could like go for like critical thinking or problem solving. It just doesn't make an effort to, but that's a different conversation.
Yeah, possibly.
One thing I think is interesting is, as you said, nowadays in school, like speech and debate classes aren't required, but in ancient Roman times and stuff, school was mostly learning how to public speak. Like,
Yeah.
it was rhetorics, and it used to be considered a very important skill to speak publicly and find a concise way to convey your thoughts. And as you said, I think it's a more and more becoming a lost skill, and people are more and more okay with not being able to speak publicly because it's never really a situation they're in anymore. And I think it's interesting to see how over time there's some things where we look back and say, oh, this has always been important, but now this thing is just dying off.
I absolutely agree with that, and I know some people are going to disagree with me on this, but I think that a class that is part free or critical thinking, part debate, part speech, part philosophy should be a requirement to graduate. Just a quick half year, you know, you have to get up and give speeches in front of class a couple times, you have to debate and actually think about what you're saying. Like, that can have such an impact on how people, you know, present themselves and speak when they have to in front of people. Because more or less, depending on whatever career, whatever school you go to from here on out, you're going to encounter people on the daily that you don't know well, or you're going to have to work with coworkers and learn how to, you know, present your thoughts in like a non-aggressive and a way that, you know, makes sense.
I agree with that completely. I can definitely say, at least me personally speaking, like after I took speech and debate, I became a lot more comfortable with like class participation and like also preparing for those debates in class. I kind of just sort of developed my own process of like preparing for like class presentations and stuff. And maybe like you can speak more to that since you do it more often, but I agree with that completely. Do you envision, sorry, continue.
No, I was just saying, woo.
Okay. Do you envision maybe continuing like sort of going to politics as just sort of a career, or just sort of like a side passion?
I've always thought that it would be a good scenario, but an unlikely one of going into politics, but more and more lately, I've considered that a viable option, especially seeing the goings-on of the last couple of years of politics in this current 2016 election has definitely made me think, you know, maybe I could actually survive out there and, you know, make some good changes. But I could see myself getting involved in local politics. That's another thing, is politicians, as Ben Franklin once said something like this, the idea of a politician is not that they, shut up, Derek, they go into a career of politics and that's what they do for the rest of our lives. The idea of having a republic, not a democracy, actually, America's actually a republic, where you elect people to make decisions and vote for things based on you, is that those people represent you, which means that someone that's been living in a small town for 20 years and has been working as a teacher decides one day, you know, I should run for public office, like state rep or even just like town selectman. And then they represent their community and the people that they know and what's best for them, which is how politicians should work. I mean, obviously, once someone has gone through the process of going to law school and has got elected to the Senate a couple of times, you know, what are they supposed to do? Retire at 40? But I think local politics is much, much more important than people seem to think it is. The more powerful a position is, the more important it seems, but that's not always the case. The president is obviously like the most involved election-wise, but the presidency isn't hugely important. It doesn't affect your day-to-day life. What's most important and what affects communities and day-to-day lives the most is local politics. So if you elect someone for town or state representative and then they are part of your state legislature in passing laws that affect your state, people I don't think realize how important state representatives are. Obviously, a lot of laws are made at the federal level, but even more are made at the state level. You can worry about what goes on at the federal level, but at the end of the day, it's going to be much easier to get your voice heard at the state level, and it's going to be a lot easier if you think a law should be changed or something should be different for that to happen state by state. Obviously, gay marriage wasn't a federal decision at first. It was people in communities that grew to people in counties, and that translated to people in states voting. Massachusetts, well, we were the first, voting, yes, this should be legal now, and that spreads. And then eventually, obviously, there's a federal ruling on it, but everything starts at the community.
Do JSA chapters ever take an active role in their local politics, like send letters to local representatives and such?
We do activism. Activism is a part of JSA that doesn't get a whole lot of attention. That is, I think, an important one. Chapters, if you have the manpower of like 20 to 30 high schoolers, of course you want to find good things to help out with. So I know some chapters do like, food drives and things for charity, but there's a correlation between kids doing JSA and kids working for local politicians. I think I don't think Winchester High School does, but I know that some other schools have programs where they can do JSA and like get partnered with a local politician, which I think is a really great thing to do. But yeah, I know that a lot of chapters definitely try and get involved in their community in a political way.
Do you have any idea of like how like it'd be possible to bring those sort of opportunities to Winchester? Or
I'm not really sure. I think maybe not completely politically involved, but I do think activism should be a larger part of JSA. Granted, I've tried to help organize those type of things before, and I've no idea how they do it. Figure out what's good, but things like food can drives, and if you can round up everyone to have like a day of volunteering somewhere, that's, I think, pretty impactful way to use like the manpower of 30 high schoolers.
Charlotte, what would you like to change about JSA, if anything?
what a great question, Derek.
I don't want to call out the school in any way, shape, or form, because I know the last couple of years they've definitely put up with a couple incidents and definitely kept us around when they didn't necessarily have to. But I think maybe seeing a little bit more support from the community would be good. I know that, sports are, constantly, they're doing, I mean, a lot of this is because they do it themselves, but constantly doing fundraisers and getting money, and people are donating and everyone wants to support sports. But, at the same time, I don't think anyone from this school, it's very unlikely that anyone from here is going to grow up to become a professional sports player, but every single one of these kids, whether they want to realize it now or not, is going to grow up to be a person that can vote. So I think if we put more effort into giving kids some kind of possible reward for attending a club, since they're not going to really offer it as much of a class besides that one half-year speech and debate class you can take. And I just like to see JSA expand as much as possible. I know the last couple of years have been very good for us. We are constantly adding new chapters at schools across the country, and I'd like to see that happen, continue to happen, where every high school has a chapter. Because so many schools have debate club that isn't JSA, but if every school that had a debate club could become a part of JSA, that would be an awesome amount of students.
Yeah, I mean, even at WHS, there are like 2-3 other debate clubs. I think there's HMC.
Yeah,
there's
Harvard Model Congress is its own little organization.
Yeah, no, but I'm
which
just
I'm
saying.
not exactly a fan of. No offense.
There's also I don't think it's HMON anymore, but there's also Model United Nations, which actually is, I went to a couple meetings. That's actually good. And I think they have a mock trial club this year. But
Yeah, JSA does mock trials. I mean, not often, but we do them enough that I don't think we need a mock trial club. No offense. But HMC and H1 I don't really have a huge problem with. I'm just not a fan of. I understand if this is the way you want to do it, fine by me, but the fact that you have to apply to get in and then blah blah blah, everything's very official, and I think things should be more lax if you want to get people involved. But of course, it's not like they have that problem. So many people apply to H1 and HMC every year, which makes me wonder what does that want? Is it because they're more accredited organizations? Possibly. So if there comes a day where JSA is a very known thing, so far I've had to explain that to guidance counselors and to adults and people curious about the club, and I'm expecting to have to explain what JSA is totally from scratch to any college interviews I might have. I think the more popular it gets, the more competitive it would get, and that would also be pretty cool.
I'm kind of surprised it's not as popular as it already is. I mean, as you were saying earlier, it's the largest student-run organization in the country.
Exactly. That's another awesome aspect of JSA is it's completely student run, and that really truly means completely student run. I mean, obviously there's like we have like one or two activities directors for the state that are just in charge of, you know, doing the illegal work of like booking hotels and such, but besides that, everything is done by students. And the one thing been told above all else from kids that are graduating, and now that I'm in my senior year and I'm on cabinet, I'm seeing it too. Working for Junior State of America organization is the closest you're ever going to get to real world job experience while still in high school. Because you have to come up with things on your own. You have to collaborate with people your age. Some of them you might not like. And at the end of the day, it has to get done.
Yeah. Maybe could you just explain for people listening what the sort of cabinet is?
So, because JSA is completely student run, it is organized into states. Ours is the Northeast state, which includes basically all of New England except for like New Jersey. That area, Mid-Atlantic New Jersey, is its own state. And inside the Northeast state, there is an area called the ECR that is like New York and that area mainly, and then the NER, which is mainly Massachusetts and some surrounding areas in different states. The cabinet works. There is a governor that is in charge of the state and a lieutenant governor that is, you know, the next step down from that. And then regionally, there's a mayor and a vice mayor. Those kids are in charge of reading through and reading through applications for positions like director of debate, director of communications, director of technology, or activities or fundraising, and also convention coordinators who do that convention work I mentioned earlier, and reading through applications of kids that apply to be on cabinet and then deciding who gets those positions.
And what position do you hold?
I am director of debate for the Northeast state, which means I come up with the ideas for debates for the 3 overnight conventions we have in the spring, the fall, and the winter. And I write the blurbs for them and that kind of stuff.
Is there like an overarching sort of leader, or is it just like all those different governors together? Like,
there is a council of governors that, as far as I'm concerned, meets semi-frequently. I mean, they're from all across the country, so not all the time, but I think a couple times a year they meet, and it's like 9 or 10 kids that are the governors of all the different regions in the United States. But my boss is the governor of this Northeast state region we're in. Other kids on cabinet, their boss is whoever the mayor is in their region, and it works by that. If you get a couple hundred kids that are all fired up about something in a room at the same time, it is a lot of fun.
I think politics is interesting, but it's very hard for people to get, at this age, to get interested in it because there's such a gap in knowledge. Like, you have to make up for all this lost time, and if you don't know anything, you don't know where to start.
Exactly.
Especially because, like, there are so many kids who, when you go on like Facebook or something and you see these political and you see the political.
I gotta talk about Facebook fights for a minute. I try not to get involved, but whenever I see this is the issue, is that first of all, people are so connected to their opinions that, let's be real, if you're arguing with someone on Facebook at like 1 a.m. about something, neither of you, yes, that was a call out, neither of you are going to change your opinions, neither of you are going to listen to what the other person is saying. You're just saying your own opinion and hoping you get more likes on your comment than they do. And that's sort of something that translates to the general public. People who aren't like already involved and haven't been for a long time have a trouble getting in because there's kind of a superiority complex that comes with being politically involved, which once again I will admit I have been guilty of, where if you know how something works and you understand it better than someone else, you kind of want to be like, oh, well, you don't get this? Like, I can't believe, like, you have no idea what you're talking about. This is such a simple, important concept. But that's not what it should be about. Like, you can go into a debate and absolutely serve the kid that you're debating against and, like, leave them speechless and win best speaker and your resolution passes and not learn a thing. Because the kid you were going up against had no idea what they were doing. Or you can go in, do okay, but the kid you're going up against is really, really good, so it ends up changing your opinion a bit, or you at least entertain some thought that you wouldn't have before. And that's what makes a successful debate.
That's actually very true. I do think, though, like on Facebook and stuff, it's not wrong for someone, like, if they have a certain view, they just feel like the need to express it, especially with social media. Like, I totally get that. Like, even I've done that before. I don't think, like, political based, but, like, you get what I'm saying. The thing that also but annoys me, though, is those, like, senseless arguments of just, like, people going back and forth for no reason. And then in the comments, they also have these giant paragraphs, essay-long paragraphs, and they're citing sources, and it's just...
Exactly.
It's really...
Every time I see that, and I know that it's a kid that doesn't come to JSA, I'm like, what? Why are you doing this on Facebook in the middle of the night? Come do this in front of actual people.
But then I feel like an even bigger problem is people who don't know, I'm not saying don't know anything, but they, like, see an article about something they haven't seen about before, and they share it, and they, like, share their opinion, and they don't really know what they're talking about. And there's nothing wrong with not knowing something and getting educated, but they have an opinion based on one thing where they haven't seen the other side and they don't really know anything about it.
Exactly.
And especially with Facebook, like, no one wants to post that all enraged and then 5 minutes later be like, okay, I was wrong, like, my opinion's changed, because there's such a stigma against admitting, like, you were wrong or I have a different opinion.
Totally. Admitting you were wrong is such an important thing to be able to do. Once again, I'm totally guilty of not being able to admit that I'm wrong. I do it all the time. If someone proves me wrong, I'm more likely to just, like, stop talking and walk away because I don't want to admit that I was proven wrong. But it's easier and it's more productive to just say, okay, you were right, you changed my opinion, and move on, than to continue an argument when you realize that you're wrong.
I think it's also when you go to, like, Facebook and stuff and just think about, like, how people are informed about their sort of, like, political news. What Facebook, like, does, or any social media sort of platform does, they give you articles that they know you'll be interested in. So you're never gonna, if you're, like, a liberal or you're conservative, you're only gonna be exposed to those particular views, and then maybe on your Facebook feed you'll see a friend who doesn't have the same opinion, but then you're only exposed to one side of the argument. And it's all, I always hate it when, going back to those, like, comment sections and stuff, when the first thing, like, a person opens their response was like, oh, you're such a this or that. And, like,
very true. Anytime I see anyone, like, use the term, like, stupid liberal or, like, dumb conservative, you've lost me at that point. I'm not gonna listen to what you're saying. The thing that you brought up about Facebook, seeing the kind of things that you're interested in, that you agree with, and offering you articles based on that, is because media over the last couple decades has transformed from, you know, an industry that was out there to give you the news and to tell you what was going on in the world and keep you educated, to an industry that is out to make a profit, which you can't blame them on. But if you know, a network like CNN is making money off of people watching it, they're going to want more people watching it. And one of the easiest human emotions to appeal to is fear. So you can put out an article that's like, inconclusive study shows that maybe eating too much of this one food over a very long period of time might cause a disease, but the study was only 20 people, so who knows? Or you can put out a disease that says, like, put out an article that says, like, eating broccoli causes cancer, and, like, people go crazy over it and want to read it and view it, and then you make more money off of ads, which is a huge problem, because, like, God, it's gotten, with this election, it's gotten so crazy. I turn on CNN and they have, like, these graphics that remind me of, like, before an MMA fight. It's exactly so familiar to the graphics that they use before a mixed martial arts fight. They have, like, Hillary Clinton's face and, like, Trump's, and, like, there's, like, a weird shadow, and they're like, tonight on CNN, Hillary and Trump go head to head, and it's like they're having a debate. They're having a debate about politics. It's not a fight. It shouldn't be. It should just be a productive debate. You know?
Yeah.
Damn, I'm losing myself. I'm getting
No, I actually understand that. I especially think it's kind of sad, like, at least for us, like, our grade, or maybe you can include the juniors too. This, the 2016 election is, for a lot of people who maybe don't do JSA, it's the first election where they're actually, like, politically aware and socially conscious of everything that's going on in the world, and they can actually, like, make legitimate opinions about sort of the countries and its policies, and yet we're sort of in this really chaotic election at the moment. But yeah.
And one thing that I've noticed all throughout the debates this election cycle is that a lot of people are just going at for personal jabs at each other.
True.
And I really think that if you are running to be president, you should be professional enough that even if your opponent makes personal things, you can put that aside and actually argue about the issues at hand. And you don't see that as often in politicians today. And you should see it all the time.
Yeah, do you have to, I mean, at like JSA debates though, do you have to deal like personal jabs, and like how do you sort of cope with that?
Literally never seen, even the like rudest, most lost kids I've never seen make a personal jab at the person that they're debating against. That just doesn't happen. You know that there's an issue with, you know, your candidates running for president when a high school debate club does it more respectfully than they do. I think another issue involving media in this election is that in a typical election, you, like, thinking back to 2012, or we were like 12, 13 years old, I still remember Obama and Romney having very in-depth debates where, like, they did make the occasional personal jab at each other, but for the most part they talked about their specific economic plans or their specific plans for fighting terrorism. And that brings in the people that have a general idea of what politics is, but it pushes away the people that don't really care at all, which is maybe a bad thing or maybe a good thing. Who knows? In a perfect world, they would get interested and they would do the research to learn, but it is a pretty hard thing and something you can't really expect of the average person to, like, put in so much time regularly to keep updated. So if you have a debate where instead of talking about actual issues and using, you know, terminology and referring to bills and to wars that people might not be familiar with, you just have two people yelling at each other, like, you cheated on your husband, yeah, well, you said these awful things about women. Anyone can partake in that. Anyone can pick a side there. And that's what's making things so crazy, is that you don't have to be supremely intelligent to understand what Trump or Hillary are saying. You just have to know that, oh, I don't think her deleting her emails was wrong, or I don't think that the wall is a bad idea, or whatever they have, because they're not really giving these in-depth ideas that make sense like we've seen in previous elections.
And not to cut you off, but I think
Please do.
something that's been happening just in America as a whole recently, and it's a little bit broader, but more and more there's this idea of liberal versus conservative, Democratic versus Republican.
Absolutely.
And it's not about, okay, like, I'm normally conservative, but this person who's a liberal has a good point or something. It's more and more just, like, no, like, all conservatives are wrong or all liberals are wrong, and people they just stick to their side, and they don't ever want to.
And what's more important, I think, what people are missing out on is just, like, it's not like which side wins. It's just like the country has to win. Like, we have to, like, there's such a lack of communication, especially like, especially over the summer with, like, so much debate over controversy over the like police shootings and stuff. Every single Facebook post I saw was just trying to blame the other side. And it's just stupid for me personally, because people are just perpetuating the problem. Like, there's no one trying to find a solution.
Yeah, and that shouldn't even be a partisan issue. You know, police violence, any kind of violence, and things like global warming. I have no idea when global warming became a partisan issue. I don't know, man. The reason the political parties exist is because, for the most part, someone is either going to think, you know, I don't think the government should be hugely involved in our lives. I don't think they have a responsibility to provide these certain amenities to our life. I'd rather they kind of stay out of it and you don't have to pay a lot of taxes and let me live my life. You're going to have people that are the opposite, and I think the government should get involved. I think they should make laws about these social issues, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And it's gone from that to people being completely hard set in their lines, and people not really wanting to admit that they might think the other party is right about something. Like, I'm pretty liberal as far as it goes, but there are, like, one or two things that I agree with the average Republican or conservative on. But if I'm in, like, a room of kids that are all very liberal, I might not want to admit it because I'm afraid they're gonna, you know, tear me apart for thinking that. This isn't just something that, like, the average American is dealing with. This is probably best exemplified in Congress, where we have, obviously the Republicans have the House majority, but Democrats and Republicans can't work together anymore. They won't. I don't know, man. I don't know what the issue is, but passing laws shouldn't be, I mean, I'm 17, what do I know, but politics shouldn't be about fighting the other party. It should be about using the strength you have in your own party and finding a middle finding common ground between the two people and meeting at a halfway point.
Yeah, it's kind of sad when it becomes just about like a party winning. And maybe to use an example that's not even American, if you look at if you look at Brexit,
Yeah.
there are so many British politicians who like voted for Brexit, and then afterwards they were like, "Wait, what did we just do?" Because they didn't realize what they were. They just wanted their side to win, basically.
What do you think about the fact that America has for a very long time had a political system where there really are only two dominant parties, and there's not really room, like we have an independent party or whatever, but nothing ever really happens with it?
Good question. I think that's something that started really early on. You know, the first couple presidents didn't have necessarily parties. I mean, George Washington famously warned us, don't do the whole party thing, but we did anyways because we're stupid. And, you know, there used to be Whigs or Democratic Republicans, and that has obviously changed definition over time, but I don't know, man. I honestly can't. I have no idea when it started, but where the polarization started, but it's definitely very prevalent. I remember learning a fun fact once that Abraham Lincoln appointed Democrats and Republicans to his cabinet. So the cabinet meetings were, you know, insane, just huge like conversations and debates with wildly differing opinions being thrown around, but I don't really think that's a crazy thing. I think that's a good thing, and that should be, you know, the model that presidents try and follow. And it's a bad thing in some ways, but it's not the worst. I mean, I know a country like Germany has a ton of different parties, and as far as their politics go, it appears to just be kind of a mess, you know, as far as voting goes. And I'd rather you have 50% of the country be like, okay, I can, for the most part, agree with this amount of people than have, like, 20% for one party, 20% for another, and, like, the views are so differing that you end up with a candidate that wins only with, like, 20-something% of the general population's vote.
Was there anything unexpected you got out of JSA? Like, you didn't think this would sort of, like, help you in some way or whatever?
Not necessarily unexpected, but it definitely was a better outcome than I was expecting, would be the public speaking skills. Yeah, like 2 years ago, and I know I'm not the only one like this. I know there are a lot of other kids in my grade and the grades before, and kids currently underclassmen that also, like, were absolutely terrible at speaking in front of people and had, like, horrible anxiety about it, that now I don't have that anymore, and that's just a fun little perk of doing JSA.
Do you think there should be more? I mean, I know we talked about, like, in school we talked about, like, having just speech and debate classes or, like, just working on, like, sort of public presentation. Do you think in that there should be, like, more political based, at least in, like, modern politics, like, more modern politically based classes just to get kids more, like, informed on stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I know the classes are definitely offered, but they're offered the same way that electives are, which is, you know, kids are going to take them if they're interested, but also even kids that are interested might not take them because a block of, like, art and then a block of, you know, like, senior focus or of speech and debate is a thing that could be taken up with, like, an extra science class or an extra English class. So I think that goes along with high school is no longer a place where we come to learn as much as we can. It's a place where we come to put together the perfect college application over a course of 4 years. So if kids were encouraged more to pick things based on their interest, I think that would change a bit. And I also think just adding in so that pressure of, oh, do I look like I'm wasting my time by taking this class is taken off, adding in a requirement for, like, a half-year speech and debate class.
I also think another thing is that, like, in history classes we talk about politics, but obviously because it's history, it's usually, like, old political things, and those relate to the modern day, but the teachers never teach it or talk about it. They don't talk about how it relates to the modern day. They don't talk about how it's affected our country, like, today. And I think that that's doing a great disservice to history, because the whole purpose of
Mystic or Heights does. Like the
Yeah, some teachers
all right,
do.
just but
That's not
some teachers definitely do. But in general, like, you learn history because history repeats itself, and if something bad happens, you can recognize the warning signs. But we don't ever really learn about the repeating itself part. It's just like, oh, this happened, might happen again, might not. Who cares?
That may be because humanity itself never realizes history repeats
I
itself.
think humanity has. Okay, this is a debate in and of itself.
Personally,
I
don't think we should spend so much time learning about early history. Like, once you hit high school, you don't need to be learning about the Bronze Age and about 1000 BC anymore. Like, just, yeah, I think this is just my own little stupid opinion. I think history should start at, like, maybe
Beginning of time.
1700, 1800, freshman year.
Well,
So then by the time you get to junior year and you're taking your required history course, you've gotten to the point where you can, like, freely learn about the last 20 years.
Actually, what's kind of like, sorry there. What's kind of I don't like personally is just 8th grade's American history, and then 9th and 10th grade's like
and then
global,
you go back.
and then
I do have to say, I mean, I agree with you largely that we should spend more time in history focusing on more recent things because they are more directly related to the current day. But even if we just relegated really old history to, like, elementary school or something, there are important things that come from, that we are part of our everyday lives today, that come from ancient Greece and ancient Rome. And while we shouldn't spend, like, an entire year on, like, oh, Augustus, like, whatever, but I do think we need to focus on that a little bit, but I largely agree with you that we need to shift more of a focus on later history, especially because at the rate we're going now, they just try to cram it all in. They try to cram in 500 years of history in, like, a month.
yeah. I mean, especially because like junior year, you end around like the 70s, I think, or it's like
Yeah.
You never
mid
get to the
70s.
modern day unless you
Exactly.
take it as an elective.
Yeah, like senior year basically. So
Exactly. Closing statement. Politics is awesome. JSA rocks. Donate to JSA if you in any way feel like it is a worthy organization. Personally, I think it absolutely is. You can go on the website jsa.org if you're interested in learning, anything about it, or if you want your kid to start doing it, or if you want to start one at your own high school. Please do. It's a lot of fun. It's hugely beneficial, and I'd love to see as many kids participate as possible.
And starting a chapter is not as
It's not
hard
hard.
as it
It
seems
really
because
is not
we
hard.
have a mutual friend who set up a JSA at
Exactly.
their school.
Starting a JSA chapter is very easy. You go to jsa.org, there's a tab you can click on where you can contact someone and be like, hey, I go to this school and I want to start one. They'll give you all the supplies, they'll tell you how many kids you got to round up and tell you to find an advisor, and then you get your stuff together and then you can have your own little chapter.
that sounds great.
Charlotte, what would you say is the most fun you've had in debate in all time?
So this one time at Cap Retreat.
Oh, talk about like fun things you do, like musical debate chairs, whatever it is.
In like your JSA, because I know like JSA, it's not just like mock debate. You guys do a bunch of a variety of activities. So maybe just go through them all.
Yeah. Weekly meetings are usually, we'll have a resolution like resolved that College Board is a monopoly. That was our last one. And we have kids get up and give main pro and main con speeches, and then more pro and con speeches after that, and then we vote on a resolution or a best speaker. But we also have, we'll do like musical chairs, which is a lot of fun, where it's like regular musical chairs, but you leave two out so that there's always two people standing up and they have to do a quick debate against each other. There are a lot of aspects to JSA that don't get done as often. I have been a part of mock trials before that are a lot of fun. I've done, we do mock presidential debates if it's an election year. I've been Marco Rubio in quite a few of those. It's fun. Yeah, and most of the conventions we go to, we get a keynote speaker that's ranges from just like someone that's involved in an interesting charity to like I've met a couple of senators, which was really cool, and definitely gotten some good advice from them about politics and about, living your life. So definitely a fun thing to check out if you're a high school age kid.
Thank you, Charlotte, for coming in and talking about debating in JSA. It was a very great conversation we had today.
Thank you, Guru.
Yeah, and hopefully more people will join JSA now after listening to you. And
God, I hope so.
It really is
we
fun.
pretty
no,
good
yeah,
turnout.
it's great. Like I said, I would do it if I just had more time. Be sure to check out our first episode, which is also on YouTube right now. We interviewed Emily Giwalo, who talked about bringing awareness to food allergies, and be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube as well. You can also follow the WHS Tech Crew on Facebook at WHS Tech Crew or Twitter and Instagram at WHS_Tech Crew. Thank you for listening to us, guys, and we'll see you next week.